like as I listen, as I'm keeping time, as I'm doing whatever, making coffee while you guys are talking, I think, okay, what is going to come up? So this, like, the idea of telling our stories, it permeates everything, right? Mm. So Pep, when you said, okay, the cause of their symptoms, when we have symptoms and it's like, oh my gosh, I don't understand it. And I've talked before about when I would get so hijacked by something and unable to figure any of it out or understand any of it. Mm-hmm. So there's that, like, what are the causes of the symptoms? And then the novelty, like we pay attention to novelty, but then if we are so familiar with the traumatic situation, then it diminishes its, we don't even recognize it for the trauma it is.
Right.
So then I think, okay, in our telling of our stories, then we recognize the trauma because we're just telling our stories, not just that it's not a big thing, but we can tell our stories, right? So, and then we see the trauma. And then, like, the novelty part, if we've, like, don't even pay attention and see it for trauma, then somebody else gasps when we say something and we're like, why did you gasp? And it's because they're like, are you kidding? The trauma.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many things that have happened to me in my life that I think that's no big deal.
Yeah.
And then when you tell somebody about it, they're like, what?
Right. I remember after, I don't know if I told you guys this, I'm sitting around with my family members after my oldest brother has died. We're sitting around after the funeral, and my number 2 brother, who died first, his wife, his widow, is in this circle. And so now I'm the only person that remains of my family of origin as we're sitting there talking. So it's me, my nieces and nephews, and my one sister-in-law. And out of the blue, she starts to talk about, so she and my brother got married when I was like 5 or 6. And she starts to talk about what she and my brother witnessed in the way that my parents were parenting me. And she starts to say, we were like, and you got to know, like, my brother was cut right out of the block of Lewis Thompson. Like, you don't mess around. You don't, like, there's the wooden paddle is right up on the door, jam. Like, his kids know, like, you don't, like, so in some respects, this is not this is kind of like, a benevolent drill sergeant who's talking about this. But Cheryl says to me, Jim and I would always, like, we'd leave your house and we'd think, like, that's not okay. The way that they've got their thumb on him. Oh. Like, that's not okay. Now, my parents, like, there was no abuse. They weren't mean. They weren't harsh, but this sense of, like, kind of clamps down. You don't do this. You don't do this. You don't do that. Like, it was a pretty narrow, lane that I was in. And I got a pretty compliant temperament. So I'm not going to give anybody any trouble. But I remember her saying this and having this, like, wave, like, physically, like, oh my gosh, somebody is naming something that I had been feeling for 50 years. Mm-hmm. And there was this felt sense of recognition and like and relief that was immediately followed by, why the heck did you not do something? Like, where were you? Like, why am I hearing it when I'm like 56 years old?
Right.
Yeah. You saw it happening. Hello.
That whole sense of, like, you're just walking around trying to, like, thinking, like, no, this is just life. This is just life. This is just life, until somebody else, like, just like you're saying, Aim, somebody else names your trauma. Mm-hmm. And
Yeah. That and naming the trauma and on seeing the novelty, Curt, when you were talking about the moose.
Oh, the elk. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I grew up in Northern California, and a friend of mine that lived in Southern California came up to visit. And she goes to the bathroom and she comes out. She's like, "Oh my gosh!" And I'm like, "What could have happened in the bathroom?" And she's like, "There are cows outside." And I'm like, "Yes, there are cows." And she just like just couldn't believe it. And so for me, I took the cows for granted. So there's this one recognizing that, oh, I'm used to it, and
Right.
you pointed it out to me. And it's also the beauty side of it, that I become so used to cows that I never walk out of the bathroom and think, "Oh my gosh, there's a cow." So
Yeah. Which is even like, it's interesting. Like for me, like it's even more that like that example is even more striking than the elk in some respects, because the elk would be that much less common. Cows are far more common for many people. And yet, because they're that much more common, it's even easier for us to just like, well, what's beautiful about a cow?
Yeah.
What's, you know,
Well, Jenny saw the beauty. Yeah, right. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, if Jenny sees beauty in a cow, then
Yeah.
it has to be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's just like, start with telling our story, because
Yeah.
it'll all come out.
Yeah. 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 So
All right, y'all.
how'd it feel?
The recording?
The episode. Yeah.
Great. I
Okay.
mean, like the idea that again, it's trauma is hard. The idea of thinking about it can be overwhelming and scary, but then it's creating beauty. Okay. And then Pep, and then I know we got to roll, but I mean, we are rolling, we got to go. When you talked about your dad and he liked photography, and in all of our trauma and in all of our whatever, we can create beauty, and he created beauty, but then it was like leaving it for you. Like
Right.
he created beauty, and
Oh yeah.
and he didn't create it. We don't create beauty for the purpose of somebody else experiencing it. We just, but then it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Gosh, that's it. We really want to, can I just say, I'm going to try to remember this, but we really want to tag that notion. We'll come back to this when we talk about family and generational trauma, but like, I really want to tag this notion that we don't ever heal our own trauma for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It is always something that we will be in the process of healing that will necessarily have downstream implications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I got to tell you too, Pep, I in given what you've ever, however you've ever talked about your dad, I was completely unaware that he was a photographer. And his, like, that's an amazing photograph.
Yeah.
It's a gorgeous photograph. And I think I was just so delightfully surprised at meeting the part of your dad that was artistic.
Yeah. So when he was he just had a high school education, and then the Korean War was going on and he was going to get drafted. So he joined up, and his dream was to be a writer. And so he went in and they handed him a list and said, "What do you want to do off this list?" And he said, "This journalism school." And the guy laughed at him and said, "No, you're not going to do that. You should be an electrician."
Oh,
so he went on to be an electrician, but he found a way to express his artistic side through photography. And the amount of photographs, I have slides, I have like crates of slides in here that he's taken. And he really had a great artistic eye for things. I have quite a few of his photographs framed in the house that are really awesome.